I'm getting better at letting people know that they like my time is everything, and that if we're gonna talk, this is internal in my business.
Yeah.
If we're having a discussion, it has a purpose that is directed.
Mm-hmm.
And once that's over, we can then have a little conversation, but then I'm out because I don't have fucking time. Like, I'm busier right now than I have been in probably 5-6 years. And I'm getting a little peeved with myself because my vision in the last 3 weeks is actually 4 weeks has deteriorated more because I'm staring at a screen longer.
Sure.
And so this is why I'm getting irritated. It's because I'm not listening to what my nervous system's actually telling me. Mm-hmm. Right. So every attempt at any of this stuff is just an attempt to regulate our nervous system. And you're just like, yeah, I'm taking all these meetings and I'm like going. And I get so jazzed up to do it. Yeah. This is your nervous system telling you something, and you're like, yeah, more. And then it's like, it's overshoot it. And it's like, fuck, why am I here?
Right.
And then it's like, oh, I made the decision to be here because I kept chasing the dragon. And for some people that dragon's booze and alcohol. For some people that dragon's exercise. Mm-hmm. For guys like us, it's all of that maybe, but then it's like, oh, taking meetings. Like, I could have a really cool meeting with this person and maybe we could do something really cool. And it's like, yeah, there's a lot of people we could do a lot of cool shit with.
Well, right. And especially if you define the intentions going into it, then you get after what you need. You bring your creative thoughts and process right to the conversation. So it's advancing, and you find that's where if you're chasing the dragon, you lose the advancement. So I want to start right there, because for what people who are listening and people who would listen to this, what Brian MacKenzie has done for myself is I found I worked with you, you mentored me, and I look at you as a mentor. So it's really cool to, again, just to hear you and talk to you is always going to be it's like I was talking to my buddy before this. I was like, dude, I'm going back to talk to coach, so I feel like I'm back in player mode here. And it's always cool to talk to you in general for myself. But one of the things that I've really worked over the last couple of years and worked a lot with you, and some of the things that have made the most sense to me, is making training and living progressive intuitively, and finding ways to understand your nervous system, regulate your nervous system, and then look at yourself at a layer of, can you decide today what's best for your performance today and know how to stop? Something I looked at in the athletic world for years was, if that deadlift said get 10 reps, put that weight on, it didn't matter what the load was, I was doing it, and then I paid the price for that on the back end many times. So I learned a lot through you of the ability to consciously train, to consciously learn that nervous system, and understand what dragon you want to chase. But for those who are going to dive in, that's something that I've always really admired about you and had great conversations with you, is that's where you challenged me personally, is to get into the depths of what I'm feeling physiologically and flip that on its head and kind of understand yourself. So I've found a lot of success on that. Obviously, that's where I try to pass the torch of your art and what you've kind of articulated in that. But man, that's what I'm excited to dive in from my thought and my perceptions, but it's great to see it.
Harvey, you're a good man. I appreciate that. You bring a smile to my face every time I see you. So, and I mean, whether it's on social media or, whenever I catch it, but, you clued into something very early. Mm-hmm. But you've always been clued into it. It's now finally, it finally made sense at a certain point, which is why we connected. And I'm honored that, you feel the way you about me. But I also am like, what we do and what I do, it ain't for everybody, because most of us are still chasing, I just did a Facebook Live for our subscription folks.
Yeah.
And one of the questions on there was about, doing nasal breathing and my performance deteriorating and what's more important, and I'm like, there's this thing with performance. I've long listened to and for quite some time agreed with the model that performance is the indicator of just about anything going on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Greg Glassman talked about this pretty well, high level. I'm now at a point where I disagree with that. And I think that performance is another metric that is outside of our internal state. And so it becomes this thing that we actually look at that is very meaningful, but has nothing, but we're willing to bypass all signals in order to do it. And by this, here's what I mean, is that if, suppose I'm somebody who wants to go and run 10 miles for the day or go hike, you know, do whatever. I'm going to go run. I want to run 10 miles.
Yeah.
I'm going to run that 10 miles no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
If I get that 10 miles done, I feel better about myself.
Yeah.
That is an outside in prophecy. That is not an inside out prophecy. Sure. So I've just given, that doesn't mean you can't go do 10 miles.
Right.
What that does mean is that if I'm not paying attention to what's going on, like how I feel, well, I felt like shit doing that 10 miles, but I got the 10 miles in. Well, why'd you feel like shit? How'd you understand that? What was going on? Maybe maybe there was a possibility that running 10 miles a day wasn't the best idea. Maybe it was more like 5, right? Yeah. Or maybe doing something different because of what your physiology is trying to communicate to you, what your nervous system is trying to communicate to you. And I mean, look, I have a big, I wouldn't say chip on my shoulder, but I would say it's chip in some regards. I kind of want to dismantle psychology.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd like to do that because I think psychology, and my good friend, and he's sitting here in front of me in his office, said something based on a lot of stuff we had talked about for the last year. That is psychology just misunderstood physiology? And this was after a lot of talking about listening to shit I was doing and how I'm doing it. And like Fergus is a very intelligent person.
Oh, yeah.
It just blew my mind when he said that. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And then, Dr. Nicole LaPera put out the other day something that really brought me back to this and why I want to go into it. And it's addiction is nothing more than an attempt to regulate your nervous system. And go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, first of all, Fergus said that to me one time when I was driving. I literally, Brian, I stopped, pulled on the side of the road, drove into a parking lot, and I told him, I said, I got a notebook in the back of my truck. I started taking notes. I stopped driving because he said that line to me too. Fergus is an absolute man. But on that addiction piece, I've thought deeply about, because of what you just said, can you look at addiction as bad? Because the first thing that I hear when I hear addiction is you're programmed to think that that'd be negative. Like your addiction train goes to drugs, alcohol, anything of that sense. And I've sat heavily with that. Wouldn't addiction to some degree, if it's tailored in a progressive way, can't you even shape that as almost a positive frame?
Could 100%. Yeah. This is why I'm really interested in dismantling. Because look, every single, this is one of the problems. So like just some background for this. Is this live?
Yeah. Are we live? Yeah, we're live.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Hey guys, are we live?
Good to see you again, man.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So at 23, I decided to get sober.
Okay.
Because I was an out of control drunk who had participated in plenty of high level drug activities as well. Nonetheless, I saw no outs other than going and getting sober.
Yeah.
And, I did a lot of work there. I was 23. I spent a considerable amount of time in self-help and rehabilitative type stuff. I went to therapists, did all these things. And, I kept coming back to this idea through this, is that we were always talking about something that was what we did in the past. And it had never moved me any further away from what that thing was in the past. And I get it to some degree because it's there to scare you.
Yeah.
Right? Don't want to go back to that because you're going to end up dead, or you're going to end up getting into trouble and doing this stuff.
Yeah.
But I started noticing things because I had gotten into this performance world, right? And, I started picking up on the fact that I started to carry some of those addictive qualities into a lot of the training that I was doing. Mm-hmm. Had to train, had to do these things, couldn't not train, right? Then I started picking up on the same behaviors from people who I not only trained, but who I trained with. And none of these people had drug and alcohol problems, right? Like by and large, none of them did.
Right.
And so I started picking up on this stuff pretty early on, before I was even 30. And I wasn't able to make sense of it until a number of years ago. But the fact is we're all addicts. There isn't one of us in the lot.
Right.
We all are trying to regulate our nervous system to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
And if you and I think the biggest illusion that we carry is that we've evolved in any way, shape, or form in the last, I don't know, 500 or 600 years.
Sure. Well, it's the people who you see have to push themselves to failure in the weight room. It's wild. We're talking about this. I just had this conversation Wednesday morning, so 2 days ago, with my roommate about that would be, and that's what you're saying, right? Addiction would be the CrossFitter that has to push himself to the absolute brink. But then you pay a price for that, don't you, on the back end? Because then you'd be exhausting the nervous system. So would you pay a price for that emotionally on the back end, but then maybe not perceive it as addiction because you're not doing drugs and alcohol, you're working out?
Well, certainly. But I think even more of that, an easier way to even look at that is I don't know any of the elite CrossFitters in this day and age that were around when I was
mm-hmm.
that haven't gotten out unscathed. I don't know endurance athletes the same way.
Yeah.
I don't know rowers the same thing. Right.
Yeah.
But the thing with CrossFit is that I think what we're really finding out right now is in terms of tissue and joint health.
Okay.
Is it turns out that if you can't develop an engine that fits on a chassis, if you're going that hard, that quickly, that moving that much weight, things start to fall apart. Like you can't keep that. They just don't connect.
Sure.
And so this is where alternative sources and things have to come in. And so you have to strap or bolt on other things like, yoga or, breathing or whatever the fuck you don't want to do. But in essence, yeah, I think you're correct in terms of that is where, you can take a baseball player. Same thing, man. It's no different. And the fact is when performance becomes the metric for actually trying to regulate my nervous system, when that becomes the thing that is the only thing that's going to settle me down, you now have your answer.
Yeah.
The problem is, and this, look, man, like I'm not saying you can't go do this, but look, the greatest swimmer in the world openly talks about the fact that he deals with depression on a major scale. His number one sponsor, based on what I understand, is a depression app, like an app for therapists. Yeah. Right. Like, so, maybe it's number 2 or number 3, but the fact is they did a huge marketing campaign with Phelps because he came out about the shit that he's dealing with. Well, Michael's not alone.
Right.
I've been dealing with elite athletes with this for quite some time. And the problem is that when they hear this, what they hear is they no longer can be elite athletes. And that's the furthest thing from the truth.
It's you just hit on it, because what's been lingering in my head that I was going to piggyback off of, or even tailor you up to another question, is that's exactly what you're talking about, of the frame being broken post athletics, because you would have used all of that, and that's where you see those guys get shattered,
Boom.
And I dealt with that. I know
they don't have the tools.
No, I've dealt with. So it's funny you said I was
the only tool to hey, it's no different than alcohol or booze. My tool has now been removed. So now what do I have as a coping mechanism?
Absolutely.
Oh, I got to go be a human.
So, what's interesting about looking at right now of the world of unknown and uncertainty, we've been talking a lot about internally in our group, is you're seeing a world fall to the layer of understanding to those tools. Right. And so, but what's interesting is breath innately is being taught to us I mean, I was being told to breathe my whole life, and then you don't know it until you are forced to be understanding of it. Like, it's like a coping mechanism or addiction. Why is it that our framing, our psychology, it almost has to be a massive failure or some shattering of your lens to force you to now understand the tool? Because breath was been, I mean, think about that. Breath was taught to me 10 plus years ago when I was training in college by our strength staffs or whatnot. But at the same time, when it's needed, if you don't understand the tool, it doesn't work. I've seen that in my first couple of years of training athletes. Is we can give you breath, but it doesn't matter until you understand the nervous system or understand the layer of the tool. It's just a tool.
Correct. And I mean, this is the thing with breathing.
Yeah.
It's a tool.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I dude, it was so funny. I probably shouldn't say it, but I did this business call with a group.
Yeah.
And they own a breath app. And one of the guys was like, I'd like to start with a breath. I'd like to start this meeting with a breath. And I'm like, did he just really do that? And he wanted to start it by entering in with the breath and this whole woo-woo thing. And I was like, wow, that just made me feel really weird.
Did you say? You probably said it too. You probably.
No, I just sat there and watched. No, I was cool. I just sat there and watched him. And I'm like, and bless his heart, like the guy's doing his best with what he's got and what he's doing. And I'm not saying he's wrong for what he's doing. I mean, that's totally fine, man. That's totally fine. There's the only right and wrong is the thinking of it, right?
Yeah.
For me though, and I mean, look, we did this Zoom thing last week with Dan Burley, myself, Dr. Peter Litchfield, and Rob, and Stig Stevenson. And, you know, there's a bunch of people who've been in the industry, who've been doing this for, 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
Like, this has been their life. And now it's time, like, their time's coming because, like, everybody's becoming aware of breathing and all this stuff, you know? And it was interesting to me because what we're doing is so different from what everybody else has done, whether it's woo-woo or whether it's, like, too scientific. Like, nothing against Litchfield. Like, Litchfield, I've got a boner for, man. I mean, This guy is literally the guy who's been studying CO2 forever, but he's a scientist. And so you're not, like, mainstream is never going to get this guy, right? But I'm going to sit there and I could listen to him all day and all night and be obsessed with him. He'd end up regulating my nervous system, right? Like, so.
Yeah.
But the interesting part was that there was like this weird world where not like I'm just realizing not everybody understands all the mechanisms that are going on with this thing, and so they think it. And here's the problem, and this is why what we want to do is we really want to be the leaders on stress management and understanding what's so important about this, how it's a global thing, it's a system-wide thing, like. And to think breathing is the answer means you just missed it.
Yeah.
You know, but it's a tool that we're using. And so the reason I kind of poke fun at the woo-woo of like doing a breathe before we start something is because when I stop talking here, I default into a breath practice. I don't need to talk about it. I don't need to do anything about it. I engage when I shut up into something so that I know that I'm paying attention to what you're saying to me, so that I'm actually absorbing what you're saying and I'm not thinking about what I'm going to say. I'm listening to you so that I'm empathizing of what's going on. And this is the whole thing. This is why psychology, I think, is so off.
Yeah.
Is it's like they're not understanding, like nobody's using the tools to act. We're talking about something that's so out there, and people are searching for a way to regulate their system that's been communicating to them the entire time where they overshot or undershot the mark.
Yeah.
And all you got to do is just pay attention to it. And so as I talk, I know I'm getting ramped up.
Yeah.
And then when it's Harvey's time to talk, I'll shut up.
Yeah.
And I'll fall into my breath practice. And so I don't need to get woo-woo.
I love that you say that, man, because I'm like you in the sense of I get excited when I start talking, and I'll start feeling my heart even pumping with the talk, because now I'm starting to get all that out through my mouth as I'm talking faster. And it's almost like you look for transitions in coaching or teaching or in positions of meetings to get your out and be direct with it, and then get into your breathing practice. I do the same thing, because now if I keep going, I know I'm going to be wasting fuel. And if this goes on for a long time, I'm in trouble. Right. So it's
back to back to back to back meetings.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, that's where, hey man, that's where I came to you in the coffee game. I got out of the coffee game when I started I'm still in it to a coffee, but I used to just, the world when you first start, you have 6 coffees a day, and that's it's
wild. It's an attempt to regulate a nervous system, my man. It's literally this place because my body's communicating that I'm tired.
Yeah.
That I need to shift.
Yeah.
But I'm saying I'm going outside, performance, caffeine, booze, but it doesn't matter, for something to stimulate so that I don't actually do what I'm supposed to be doing.
There it is, man. Midday. Let's go. I love it. No, well, so the thing that
she'll be there for a minute, and then when we're done, she'll get up and we'll go for a walk.
Go for a walk, right? Yeah, and throw the tree around. So I look at psychology because that's where I started in sports psych when I went to ball, and then I was in tune with questions. I think anytime that you come to your own curiosities, you're probably on the right path, right? Because you'll start experimenting things. You'll start kind of questioning things, and you get frustrated, right? You get frustrated with, like my thing was the yips. I had anxiety in baseball, which ran me out. And everyone force-fed, in my analogy of it, they force-fed more problems onto a problem that I didn't even know where to identify with. I couldn't identify the problem, so I was getting fed more problems. And that was really frustrating for me. And that was where I've talked to Fergus a lot about that too, in sense of choosing certain things, which would be physiological. Right? Because now I can pinpoint a tool and learn it and use that to optimize my system. Where the psychological world, to me, I would always have the question of, well, how do I see progress in this first and foremost? So how would I see this to be advancing? And then there's such a computerized experience system that I don't even know. And I'm trying to solve the thinking up here. So it was almost getting out of the mind and getting into the body and doing sort of, we talked a ton about nature, getting out into understimulating yourself, getting yourself into situations of the nervous system. But the physiological flow has never made more sense to me until I started training with you and learning that stuff and using heat and ice and sort of beating up that nervous system and learning that. That was you used to yell at me back in the day about the, breath holding in water or cold too much, but that was a part of my experiments, too, of learning that system. But I think that was my biggest corrupt or disgruntledness with psychology, was it didn't make sense to me. One, knowing how to sustain it, because I couldn't find anything that was deemed as progressive. And it just seemed like more problems on top of a problem that I already couldn't identify.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. And here's the thing: if you're not pushing that edge, and if you're not overdoing it, you ain't alive.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
No, I mean, you can just see my colors and know they like to overdo things. You said something that's really interesting in there, though. Is it's like, and this is another thing I'm kind of going after, but it fits in with this whole psychology thing, is, we look at getting outside as getting into nature.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's not that that's not true, but this just shows a formal disconnect, and it's just, you're just using language, right? Like you'll understand what I get at here, but, we have a major disconnect in understanding that we are nature.
Right.
And so we put on ourselves, well, I got to go out there in order to feel better. And going out there will make you feel better. But is that what's necessary? it's the thinking, it's the belief that that is what it is. Because I'll tell you what, I go into San Quentin every week. I haven't been able to since the quarantine.
Sure.
But I'll go back, and, you know, they get to get outside every day, and that's a big treat to them. But by and large, they live in cells. And right now, they're not allowed outside. They're all quarantined in their cells this whole time. And that's gnarly, man.
Yeah, I bet.
What these guys are having to deal with. And I'm not saying that right or wrong, what they shouldn't be needing to deal with, but the fact is I would challenge any human being to go see that situation themselves and understand it, and then walk away from that after spending some time with these people who want to learn and, you know, want to change how they're doing things, how they feel then. And, you know, I had a pretty big understanding of what I thought nature was and what I thought all this stuff was before I got into all this. And I used to say a lot of the same things, but it turns out language actually is pretty important. And we as a society, a suffer culture, you know, which is why we look to performance for things. Yet we aren't better performers. We aren't in the slightest.
Yeah. Why do you think
we're not much stronger than we ever were? We're not much faster than we ever were.
Mm-hmm.
Technologically speaking, we have made some serious advancements. And this is where the illusion starts to erode at our being.
Yeah.
Because we continue to push people, and I'm not saying Elon Musk shouldn't be pushing things, but we continue to push people like Elon Musk, who I can attest to, as I've been connected.
Yeah.
Who's completely disconnected from his own nature.
Yeah.
The amount of stress and everything that he is under and has, any one of us would be freaking out and you know, not knowing how to do these things. And I'm not close to him in any way, shape, or form. I just understand what I've been connected to before, right? And look, we continue to think that we have evolved because of outside things that are not a part of us.
Mm-hmm.
Biologically speaking, we have actually devolved.
Sure.
Medicine has advanced. That's not a biological advancement. That fits into a medical technological advancement.
Mm-hmm.
We aren't like when I go look back, like, look, where you live, man, I am enamored with Native American culture and indigenous culture because of what happened during the 1800s and how people had to cross that frontier and what sort of shit they had to deal with the Comanche, Apache. You know, these were war societies, and they had no idea what was coming. And then all of a sudden, Whitey shows up and is like, yeah, this is my land now. And it's like, what? And had it not been for the revolver, we didn't be in a very different society right now. Sure. But the fact is the danger of crossing the plains, which was thousands of miles long, we're talking 1,500 miles, I think, in length, and move through your neck of the woods, right? People had to have balls the size of elephants to say, fuck it, excuse my language, but I'm going to put my life in jeopardy every single hour of the day. And this is why at night when we light a fire and celebrate around that fire, why we're celebrating and why we're coming together, because we've made it. Right. And we're going through harsh winters that nobody today would ever make it, maybe Wim, right? And then, you know, like a few of us who followed in suit, but then it's like, you know, these indigenous cultures knew how to survive in a land that was so harsh and so unrealistic, but yet they paid attention to the land, they paid attention to themselves and what happened and how they felt and what it did. And never has a culture in indigenous cultures ever set up camp in floodplains like New Orleans or Houston.
Yeah.
Everything's been there for us and been told to us about how, hey, pay attention to this, of which we've done none of.
That's a great point. That's a great point. You know, I think about it. We hear this a lot. I hear this a lot. And I say this a lot too, that this is the easiest, most comfortable time. And I know you hear this and say this too. It's the most comfortable time that we know in existence. But my question is, do you think that 100 years ago, 200, 300 years ago, at every layer of existence, wouldn't that group of people say the same thing?
To a large degree, yeah.
You know, like
Yes.
wouldn't they have thought of, wouldn't that tribe have thought that was like, that would have been their normal?
Yes.
So do you think, what's the learning tool of that concept? Because wouldn't that be, what would be the benefits of inviting some sort of stressor environmentally into your life? Because then you can connect to that fire, you can connect to that openness, that naturist. Wouldn't that be some of the steps or the trails that would lead you into understanding your own biology?
Yeah, I think I understand the question. You know, I don't think any indigenous culture has ever said I need to get outside.
That's what I'm saying. Like, wouldn't you need to study that and look at that as, because look, man, like I live in Minnesota. I don't want to do that. You know, like I don't want to live like that. But
No, and I'm not like, and my suggestion is not that we go back, but I will tell you this.
Right.
Let's be clear. I don't think there's a human being right now that could make it with the way that Comanche lived.
Right.
A 4-year-old was given a horse, and by the time they were 8, they were expected to be able to hang off the side of that horse, pull something off the ground. They were able to fight off the back of a horse like no other culture's ever seen. They were a war culture. They were brutal, dude. It was Genghis Khan brutal. Like they fucking tortured people. But that was what they believed in, and that was how they lived. But in that, what they were capable of doing and what everybody else was capable of doing was almost double or triple. But here's the thing. I don't think they ever sat there and said to themselves, well, I got to get up and train today.
Right.
I got to get up and go get outside. I got to get up and go do these things. Right. And here, this is my point, is it's like we say getting outside, I need to get into nature. Like I've corrected probably, I don't know, 10 people last week on this. Like, not corrected. I've just
I know what you're saying.
brought this to conversation.
Yeah.
You are nature. All you have to do is get connected to yourself. And learn to regulate yourself and understand that you can do time doing anything. Why is it a monk, and this is what I tell my San Quentin guys, why is it a person who decides to give up all possession, move to the middle of the mountains in Asia, and not live around anybody other than his fellow monks, and isolate himself for the rest of his life and do breath practice, why does he or she become enlightened and you become tortured? And it just, they're like, wait a second.
You're not getting a quick response.
Well, I'm like, this is your choice. Yeah. This is our problem, is that we don't understand we still have a choice. We still have a choice in how we view and navigate everything. And that's what the beauty in being human is. And I think the most beautiful thing about being human is this, is that we are storytellers that can actually work to understand reality. Reality is never the story. Reality is, and let's just look at like trauma. And I talk about this openly, but my issues with my dad, I finally was able to rope that thing, right?
Sure. And
I didn't really understand it for a number of years, but I knew I had discourse with him, and I struggled with having a relationship with him to some degree, right?
Sure.
And, I struggled because he was volatile, verbally abusive to some degree. He didn't, he wasn't around a lot. He was a drunk sometimes and showed up hungover. And so I carried these things about him, right?
Yeah.
This was the story that I got to see. In reality, he was just doing the best he could with what he had.
Right. So
am I able and willing to see that?
Well, so when that happens, or when that crash course comes crashing down in many spectrums of the world, right? Wouldn't you look at, you're getting that experience or that acknowledgement in the moment, but you're talking about a lifespan of experiences. So how do you figure out which leak to fix? Or how did you even know that I'm starting to change direction and become?
Well, to be quite honest, by and large, it all stems from childhood, whether we want to openly dialogue about that or not.
I was hoping
this all stems from childhood.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are and how good you are. Everything you've ever done and learned to do stems from childhood. That's how you develop your patterns for being seen and heard.
Right.
This is how you got love. Ryan got it out of being rebellious because he had a father that he dealt with that literally was like this. But guess what happened when I acted out? I got the attention I needed.
Yeah.
Oh, and then girls like the bad boy. Oh, weird. Like this just continues on. Oh, why don't I be somebody who stands up and talks about something that he sees as like very different than the world is explaining it right now? Oh, look, you got attention again. Like weird, like this just follows itself. And if you're willing to go back to the beginning, you're probably going to find where that began and why you develop the relationships that you do. And so the fact is nothing's personal in this world. That's just a story.
I love that.
That's just a story. Yeah. There's nothing personal in this world, even if somebody stabs you.
Yeah.
It's not personal.
Right.
It really isn't. And we all struggle to understand that. But the fact is that's the tool. And that's the thing is it's like this experience is whatever I want to make it. And that's why we tell that lion and antelope stories. It's not about being the lion, although it is.
Right.
It's not about going out and hunting and fucking killing antelope. It's about the ability to change the narrative. I can change the narrative in any situation I'm in. That's the unique ability about being human. And our problem is that we're stuck in language and context that has us looking at things like I need to get out in nature versus I'd love to get outside today, but if that doesn't happen, I'm going to get connected to myself. And that is nature. And we have missed that opportunity. And we're missing it. And so that's the goal, is to connect people back to their nature. And it just so happens that our breathing is that thing that's telling us what's going on at every fucking second of the day.
You said something in there that's really cool, and it triggered me to think of, you said this years, I don't remember when I heard you say this, but it stuck with me about being a human, of a slave to the routine. It's something in that realm of that you used to say, you've said before about, do I have to meditate to be able to speak, or do I have to do this breathing practice to be able to lift? And it's so, you see that, because that would also go back to the full start of the conversation of addiction, coping, and all these sort of things of now all of a sudden you tie into these experimental things. Now, what I'm curious as I'm thinking through that is, as an adult or older, let's say, and you're a performer and you have to you become a slave to routine, or you have to do a specific routine. Is that also linked to an emotional trigger that's not even involved with your sport? Does that make sense?
My friend, follow the patterns.
Yeah. I knew you were going to say
they tell the entire story. Do you think there's a reason Bruce Lee talked about patterns and not being a part of the patterns? Oh, be like water. Water, when you put it in a cup, it becomes the cup.
Right.
I pour it on the ground, it follows the ground. Like water adapts and goes into everything.
Yeah.
Right. And this is, I mean, look, I'd love to be like, I figured it all out and I do this every day. No, man, I hit these walls all the time. I hit the patterns all the time. But the fact is the patterns that I'm trying to create now become things where I don't have to think about them, because look, and this comes back right to the psychology thing and the addiction thing, an attempt to regulate my nervous system. Right. And so if I'm in these patterns, the entire goal of the nervous system is to be autonomous. It means, that means simply to not think, to just go on autopilot and repeat. If you want to learn anything, you can't be on autopilot.
Take that, run that back through me.
There goes addiction.
Yeah, see, run that back from me, because we got a question too. I want to ask it, but I need to hear that again, because it kind of triggered me out of hearing that.
Yeah.
Because and how I thought of it is because I looked at meditation or mindfulness for a long time to eliminate thinking. and to eliminate that. You spend a great deal of your early days of meditation going, this doesn't work, but you don't understand some of the tools, right? And you want to eliminate those emotional experiences or those things that you're tied to, right? So now you sit alone in nature or wherever, and you have now been exposed to that, and you're not understanding the exposure, so you can't really get outside of it and see it for what it is, or see practical wisdom increasing and all those sort of things. And something that you said in that sort of made me think of how that's what we also have to eliminate, that thinking too. Like just sitting down and trying to practice meditation and being overwhelmed with thinking, that's where I think the psychology world could kind of get fuzzy with you too. Is now you're looking at it as, well, that's just an opportunity to see the pattern. So it's actually could be a positive that you're having thoughts taking place.
Most certainly.
Yeah.
Those thoughts become nothing more than what's happening. Why? Like, look, man, I was with my girlfriend hiking the other day, and I was a douchebag. I was just a douchebag. She just likes to do these insane, we're talking like running, and like it was 10 miles of hiking, and the wind was coming on. It was the evening. It was getting cold. I was cooked. I got very little sleep the night before. All this stuff's going on with work and and I ended up being a douchebag. Like I was just so negative. Yeah. Like she's like, you're like, you got poopy pants, man. And then she ended up running away from me and just taking off and leaving me in the middle of nowhere, because she can do that, because she's really good at what. Anyway, so this happened. That was a sign that I was cooked.
Yeah,
and so the thinking should be a gateway to understanding, but it's like meditation's great in that it allows us to get clear of what's going on. And I think that's where the beauty in it is. But the fact is you're not going to meditate your way through plowing a field, right? Although you can. That is meditation for some people. Working out is meditation for some people. I mean, I just regurgitated something somebody else said. Right. But the fact is meditation can be anything you want it to be.
Right.
Right. But let's just take this back to the monks.
I was hoping you would.
I think, in my opinion, I mean, being a monk's great and all.
Right.
But how convenient that you removed all of how society has progressed from all these stressors.
Right.
You've removed them all.
Yeah.
So now it's very easy to get enlightened. How about the person who learns to do this in
the
stressors,
yes.
in it all, and who's learning how to navigate? That's what I'm interested in.
Well, right? And that's performance.
And it's not that I don't respect monks. Correct.
No, I know what you're saying. I know.
Correct. Exactly. And so my language, make no mistake, my language here is not, you shouldn't go, and performance shouldn't be a part of what you're doing.
Right.
But at the heart of all training, at the foundation of all training, is the ability to make a better decision, not to win.
Oh, tremendously.
And unfortunately, that's where we're off. Winning becomes a byproduct about making better decisions all the time. Whether that's learning a new kick flip, throwing the ball with a little bit more curve, right? Running a little faster, that's a better decision.
Well, it's funny. I work with a lot of guys who are in the minor leagues as well as guys who are in the big leagues and across all fields. But it's something we talked about this before they left for spring training. Now it's different because they're back. But my question to them was, what elite 10-plus year professional athlete crushes Bang energy drinks, or crushes stimulants, or is constantly living on needing to speed up recovery? There's another Fergus one, right? Of you can't necessarily speed it up, you just delay it. But it's one of the things where, I mean, look at that. What's your experience with high performers? Do you notice that difference? I mean, I notice high level humans who they're not sustainable if they fall victim to the artificial or outside of their own natural nature ability to stimulate their energy. Because that is how I started with the coffee thing. Now, I could have coffees a couple years ago and do that, but you can't do it for a lifetime.
Yeah, like I'm capable of having a couple coffees a day now, and then I'm maxed.
Yeah,
I used to do ample coffee all day, but that was because I learned how to. I learned what sensitivity meant. I learned what dosing meant.
Well, and that's what I was going to say to you. Have you noticed a difference have you noticed that? Have you noticed that people who are very talented, who can't get away from that, or compared to people who sustain high performance, people who, do they get off of that? Have you, because I know you're around a lot of people who do high intense,
The
high
best,
things.
the best performers in the world, the best of the best.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'll give one person as an example who I had a very intimate relationship with.
Mm-hmm.
Laird Hamilton.
Okay. Yeah.
There is nothing but being connected and knowing when things are off.
Mm-hmm.
There is no outside. There's rarely or minimal outside in stuff. Anything. He likes his coffee.
Yeah.
But he doesn't overdo it. Like he's very in tune with himself.
Mm-hmm.
It's the ones that are reaching for all these other things that limit what they're able to do. I mean, Rich Froning didn't have a whole bunch of stuff that he did.
Sure.
There was not a lot out. It was just a very regimented, very tight routine, and he went based off of how he felt. That's how he programs.
Yeah. So, and that's what I love, man. And that's why we started it too, that's the overarching theme. I know what I'm asking, but I'm going to ask it just to get you speaking on it even deeper. But that's hard to do because we have now become so in tune with needing a monitor to tell us what today is about to be, or we need to track this. And when you get exposed to that, and that's becoming the slave to those sort of things, or becoming, you have to have this number to feel like you're this person. And people, I mean, in baseball, if your radar gun or your computer system isn't looking high, psychologically, you will completely bash yourself for days, or you'll futuristically be nervous about competing in a few days.
Yeah.
And so, and I've been able.
I deal with. Yeah.
Yeah, I was able to train with Laird at his place, and dude, you're right on, man. I mean, he's unlike anything I've ever been around. But why do you think that we struggle with that as a whole across spectrums of sport to not teach what you just said more in depth?
Simple.
Go ahead.
Simple. It's the outside in data.
Mm-hmm.
It's the when. It's the point. It's the weight. Like, I've got to lift this. I've got to do this. I've got to hit this. It's my heart rate. It's look, somebody just told me that Whoop fast tracked the breath thing. So Whoop now is able to track your breathing on their strap. I don't know how blue in the face I'm going to have to get about this.
Yeah.
But every one of these devices is incredibly off. I've got stuff that's like thousands of dollars that I wear.
Yeah.
That picks up respiration rate. And it is highly off.
Mm-hmm.
I could be holding fucking 6 breaths a minute and it's telling me I'm doing 12 or 13.
And it's worth
That's an incredible amount of yeah. Like, so you think, and here's what I mean by saying something that I wear on my body, my chest, okay? So this is close to the heart. This is right at the diaphragm, right?
Yeah.
So it should be able to pick this up. We're talking about peripheral devices that people are using to monitor stuff to tell them how they're feel. I'm as guilty of this as anybody. The moment I put on the Oura Ring, the moment I put on my Garmin, the moment I start looking at this stuff, and it changes how I think.
It instantly.
And this is what we're missing. And so I have to remove these things, like for considerable amounts of time before I go back and start using and playing and doing things, to seriously, like, detach myself from it, because this is a technological advancement that's given us the power of anything we want at any given time, in any given place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's wild, man.
That's not a biological advancement.
No, It's not. I mean, that's kind of how you, like I said, I kind of alluded towards the cold years ago, and I always had the time, and it's kind of get away from the time, get into your breathing, and start using cold or heat or those sort of things to measure with your breath. I mean, we were doing hill sprints today, and I've really adopted that aggressively of measuring CO2, tracking your CO2, and then naturally, and then building a program off that. Is that sort of how you get away? I know we both go into the technology at times too. I mean, I still like checking it out, and still doing those sort of things.
Yeah.
But and so I'm teeing you up for that too. But then getting away from yourself, what are some of the things? Obviously, you do some phenomenal experiments. But what are you sort of finding as over your course of your personal career that's been the best baseline intuitive thing to track? Is that your CO2 tolerance test?
Yeah. I mean, it's whatever breath protocol I'm doing that morning.
Yeah.
That day, that's telling me exactly where I'm at. Because I've done them for so long and I'm so many different ones. I know where they would be at, where they're off, but I also know when I'm training.
Yeah.
I mean, this is why we talk about training. Is like, if I start working out and I start warming up and my breathing is labored or harder, it's something at work levels that it normally isn't.
Right.
I know I'm off. I know I'm crushed. Right. So I know, like, I instantly know what to do. And so I can play around with a lot of different things, whether it's cadence, light, weight, like, so getting speed out of the nervous system, or it's like picking something up heavy and slow, strength. What kind of response am I getting out of that? Oh, when I get up, am I getting lightheaded? Is my blood pressure low? Like, these are all things that are indicating where I'm off. And these are all things that change pretty quickly. Unfortunately, when we're looking to gather other data around these things, like, look, triangulation's great. It's a good thing to do. Yeah. Unfortunately, I still think it still gets us drawn to something that's pulling us away from the whole fact of, I need to go get out in nature.
Yeah.
No, you are nature. You need to get into yourself. And when you get there, that is when you're going to really understand what nature is. That's when we are going to stop trying to destroy everything, man. It's like, look, like, we think we're so smart, and I'm not saying that, like, medicine hasn't advanced us. I don't want polio to come back. I don't want the smallpox to come back. I want somebody to find a vaccine for this fucking coronavirus. All right?
Yeah.
But I will tell you what, I reposted something yesterday from Nature's Metal on what deer antlers. That is weaponized cancer. That is an evolution that an animal figured out how to weaponize. In turn, they took bone cancer and realigned it. It's called evolution. And we're so invested in, we need it now, that we're missing things, so we go to destroy it versus to understand it. So now we're in a pandemic with a virus because a bunch of people fucked up, right? And so now it's a scatter to figure this out now because so many people are dying. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. That isn't what I said. Yeah. What I am saying is that we're not trying to understand biology. We're not trying to understand the intricate workings of what we are, which is nature. And I am invested in really understanding that for myself and sharing that and really sharing that. And I think I think we could be performing at much higher levels than we currently are, because I don't feel like we are biologically any superior than we were 200, 300, 400 years ago. I do not.
You do the best. You're the best. You're the best around in terms of getting that information, articulating that information. I'll have something for you after this, but before I get to a question that I've been thinking about myself, that I'm not going to not have a chance to have a talk with you and not ask you. But the first thing to think of it as is, think about how many times. I mean, we don't set the system up to make what you just said advantageous, because there's a lot of times where guys are getting tracked off of technology. You look at the hockey community, they won't show a lot of those guys will measure themselves because guys get not traded or picked up or taken on teams because of readings, so technology could screw a lot of that system, which I don't know much in the endurance world or what they do, if they do that in swimming, CrossFit or anything, or any of those sort of positions. But is that the dragon that we chase? Do you think that that's the player development side, is that we want to have that confidence?
This all comes to, I mean, I'm, call me conspiracy theory or whatever, but this all has to do with money. This all has to do with money.
For sure.
This is a loss of value system.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, and what I didn't say, and I'll continue to repeat, what I didn't say was that we can't make money.
Yeah.
But the dollar is what's chasing that.
Mm-hmm.
Versus give me a guy that can show up on any Sunday and fucking perform. I want to know. I want that dude.
That guy.
I would speculate. Now I don't know Peters that well, right?
Yeah.
Only had a couple convos with him,
yeah.
but I followed him, and who he portrays himself as. I would say this: upon retirement, he's not going to have any problems.
I can confirm that he's doing just fine.
Yeah. So, why? Here's a guy who's curious and wants to learn. Right. This is and this is the solution, I think, for things like addiction.
Mm-hmm. Hold on, bro. I lost you there.
And it's much more complex than that. But the fact is you there?
Yeah, say that again, dude. I freaking lost you in the climax. Go ahead.
Shit.
The addiction part.
What did I say?
Brian Peters, the addiction part.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's like, look, this is the solution for addiction. Is like, what do you want to learn?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, get curious. Go play. Go learn. Like, I literally go read books to things that I'm interested in, like this whole psychology thing. Like, I'm in a rabbit hole with psychology and the nervous system again. And like, I understand these things. I've participated. I've read books. I've done, like, I've been invested in educational stuff with psychology. But it's like, I really want to understand it. I also am breaking down nutrition and the fact of, the covalent bonds with carbon. Weird, like there's this thing that hasn't been communicated about nutrition that actually involves breathing. I'm so curious about this that I'm learning about it. I'm not sharing a whole ton about it because I'm still learning about it, right?
Sure.
But it's like, I'm so invested in it that I'm like, I don't have fucking time to go fucking get drunk. I don't want to get drunk because it's going to screw up like how I'm going to, like, I don't want to go like, exhaust myself to kingdom come so that I can't go read the book I want to read this evening. That's making, getting me back to where I want, and I mean, so this is where it's like, Peters is a curious guy. He's always been a curious guy from what I can gather.
Yeah.
So why would a guy like that have any issues upon retirement? He's not going to, you know?
That's a great point.
This is the point though about teams. But going back to this is, it's like at the professional level, these are businesses. You know what a hospital is?
Business.
It's a business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a business, man. And until we stop putting the responsibility of the medical community, who understands medicine, not health. Let me say that again. The medical community understands medicine, and they are there for emergency situations. They are not there to give you advice on what health is.
Wow, that's profound and awesome. That's amazing, man. So to kind of because we do have a couple of things I want some people on this that we can try to answer real quick, and then we can move on with our days because my sauna's heating up. And we could always keep this thing rolling.
Probably off.
Yeah, we could keep rolling this thing on our own time. But one thing that I love about you, man, and I got to ask because I've been talking a lot about this to athletes and people just in the space of anything that they do, you know, you do a phenomenal job of articulating your own ideas. And I know that curiosity is what led me to you. And we've had these conversations since I've known you. So it's always been awesome to dive deep into my thinking, your thinking, come out of it with thinking, which I'll do after this. But, you know, I've always thought of it as is if you don't spend time articulating your own idea, if you don't spend time articulating your own thoughts, you're met with humiliation right away as feedback because people aren't comprehending the time you put into it. So if you don't put time into your own nature, your own thought of health, your own part of nutrition, breath, if you don't articulate that on your own end, anytime you take a fragile idea out into society, they're going to blast you with feedback that if you're not deep enough into your own thinking to confidently hang in there, it just goes away. And I think that's where a lot of people lose curiosity. And that's kind of what has been so fun to listen to you over the years is that there's so much articulation on your own end. And you just said it. I haven't done enough of nutrition on this yet to talk about it and teach it. And how have you, because I look up to you in that sense, how have you dealt with that? Because I know you are met with feedback and criticism and things of your thinking. How have you saw through that just for your personal self to keep it rolling?
Well, I mean, if you're not getting criticized, you're not doing enough.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned to take the criticism as I think the most important thing about criticism is to be able to see it for what it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not personal, even though it may feel personal.
Right.
It just means sometimes you might need to go look at something. And if it creates a reaction out of you, you're obviously buying into it, right? You know, Bill, I think it's Bill Burr. He's a comedian, one of the best.
Yeah.
Said something. He talks about the fans, and he's like, if you're paying attention to all the nice things that everybody's saying about you, all the great things everybody's saying about you, you're going to need to pay attention to all this negative shit everybody's saying about you too.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I think a lot of people on social media get really caught up in. But I like if everything's about process,
Mm-hmm.
and I have a process to what I do things. I would love to be sharing a lot of the stuff I'm going through right now, but I haven't worked it out enough to feel, I guess confident is one of the things.
Sure.
Because if I'm going to put something out, I really want to understand it. I mean, I'll be totally fucking candid that I'm actually fairly disappointed in like the breath space right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and people who, you know, I mean, like, look, there's this video that went around with this doctor explaining this nurse's breathing protocol for COVID-19. And it's like, it's so well intended that it's like, I don't want to jump on and bash too hard,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like, they're so far out of their profession and their line, they don't understand what they're actually talking about. They're just doing something because it's of the reaction it's having. They don't even understand why it's doing what it's doing, yet they're fairly educated human beings, right?
Yeah.
And this is just another point to where this is people who understand medicine, not health, right? And so I am fairly confident in what I do at this point because I believe I've spent I've not only spent enough time studying it, I've got so much goddamn skin in the game, meaning I participate in this on a daily basis, and my entire day is covered in it. When people ask me what my breath practice is like, I can only give them tidbits because it'd be overwhelming. Yeah. It's going on right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It goes on all day long, and it wasn't how I wanted to do it. It's just what happened. It's a byproduct of the work I did, right? And this is what performance is about. Performance is the byproduct of what you learned, how to make better decisions and how you evolved, right? And that's more or less how this all transcends. Mm-hmm. And so I'm fairly confident in what I'm doing, and I'm fairly confident right now that we understand more about breath work than anybody else out there. Mm-hmm. I am almost certain. And I've been on calls with a lot of people who are really knowledgeable.
Yeah.
Now, there are individuals who understand the chemistry, the neurobiology, like things much better than I do.
Sure.
But what they don't understand is the application of these things and what that actually could be leading to. And so whether I am right about this or not doesn't matter, but I feel confident enough that I've done enough work and read enough research. I've read enough literature. I've read enough on, on anatomy, on physiology, to understand the components that go to play, and why I feel disappointed with people who just feel like they should just be doing these massive hoopla breath practices with people. And it's like, I don't think you actually understand what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, I really don't. I think you're doing something because you think it's fun and you think you understand it, but you don't really want to understand it. You just want to sit out on this edge and have fun with it. And then you're making $1 off of people saying something like, I've got this breathing thing for COVID-19. And it's like, what?
For sure, man.
The fuck just happened? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like that's why we did that call, was because there were some people in our industry who literally were doing COVID-19 breathing stuff. And it's like, holy.
Yeah. Where do you go?
That is so irresponsible.
Yeah.
And but it also just shows me where they're at. So, hey, here's some stuff you can do in order to help build your immune system and get you functioning better, so that you're actually connected to your nature and you understand when you're cooked, so that your immune system doesn't get compromised in a time when it should not.
100%. Nailed it right there. I freaking love that breakdown. Well, hey man, I want to hit these two. We got 2 questions. I'm going to super long. We'll try to go to it real quick. So one is, how do you think guys think routine plays into your own nature? How do you guys think routine plays into your own nature? Is there a healthy balance between routine while also being free?
Most certainly. Most certainly. Like, look, in season, for an event, you need discipline in order to create a habit that's actually going to get you to the goal of your priority of that goal. But but remember, the foundation of that goal is the ability to make better decisions.
Yeah.
If you're training for anything, whether it's shooting a gun, taking the bar, fucking lifting more weights, or running a marathon, you still are trying to make better decisions, so that your nervous system has to be able to regulate itself, right? And fall into autopilot. Once autopilot's found, you get the chance to now step up and step out of autopilot to develop better habits and make a better decision. So that's what multitasking is, right? We are actually multitaskers. I used to say we can't multitask. I was totally wrong. Motor control is multitasking. The ability to drive a car and carry on a conversation is multitasking.
Wow, good. Yeah, I'm glad you said that.
That's what I mean by being autonomous. Like, the whole goal of the nerve. Like, I don't want to have to think when I stand up.
No.
Did I just go, quads, hips, knees out? Like, but here's the thing. If I have knee pain from squatting, I'm going to need to think about squatting until I don't have pain from squatting, and then I don't have to think about it, and then I can carry on a conversation and do something else.
Yeah, that's when you get out of it. That's also like driving a car. When you're 16, it's hard to have a great conversation.
Exactly.
30, you could decide to pull over when Fergus is on the phone.
But here's the reason why you shouldn't drive a car and text message.
Yeah.
I'm in a sympathetic, focused state on the machine in front of me. I'm in panoramic vision, peripheral ability to navigate anything and everything. I'm in a high focus state. I can only focus on one thing. That's why it's so dangerous. You can't multitask that.
Nails. That's also, dude, that's the ice too. Get the eyes, get the vision out.
So think about your players and your athletes who go into this like crazed roll, and it's like, hey, yo, I need you to be able to do this. If you can't let that go, we can't move on.
I love it, man. Let me get this one. This one's going to be long, so hang with me here.
Okay.
It says, Brian, you mentioned that humans haven't changed biologically over the past 500-ish years and that we need to get better. But how is self-improvement, connecting with ourselves, going to impact us biologically as species? I mean, if your self-improvement doesn't get your offspring a genetic advantage by way of changing the gene's DNA you pass on, how will becoming better help biologically? This might be 1,000. Yeah. So that's the question.
I don't know that you can pass on empathy.
Okay.
You can be brought up around it. I don't know if there's a genetic trait for it.
Sure.
And but I'm just speculating. But so your art. So here's what I'm just gonna real quick.
Roll with it. Yeah.
Our jaws have devolved.
Mm-hmm.
We have narrower jaws. Our ancestors had perfect teeth.
Yeah.
Perfect teeth. They didn't have to have their wisdom teeth pulled out. And although their brains weren't larger, they still functioned really well. We think because our brains are larger, and this is speculation, the brain part, all right? But I'll stick with the jaw for right now.
Right on.
Our teeth and jaw have narrowed. This has drawn us back. This has made our sinuses smaller. This has made it harder to breathe through the device that was created for our respiratory system, right? Mm-hmm. No indigenous culture that we know of uses mouth breathing. Literally, when you go back through time, it's been recorded in plenty, and you can go and look at it now. They breathe through their nose on purpose because they're utilizing something that allows them to function and be in tune with their own nature.
Yep.
And they didn't have to go and start a breath practice for it. They just did it because they saw the repercussions of what happened in civilized worlds when the jaw started opening. But that's why the jaw started opening, is it got narrowed because of the food choices that we started using, right? So what did we do? Well, we decided to start pounding meat, right? Then we got fire, started cooking meat, broke it down even more, right? And cooking our food. Then we started doing things like, when the baby comes off of breastfeeding, we're going to mix, even though it's got teeth, we're going to still give it really soft food so that it can easily digest things.
Yep.
Would you think a kid's got teeth for a reason? Look, the orthodontic world is about to be flipped on its head because there's a number of dentists and orthodontists who are onto this and are about to shatter this whole paradigm.
Oh, yeah.
And my jaw has changed as a result of the work and efforts I've put in. I had braces as a kid. We didn't need braces. What we needed was something to widen the palate and the jaw, of which it would have adjusted and gone back to normal size to where the teeth fit in normally, right? They literally come in normally and straight when we don't eat shit, right? But we got braces, and that was the advancement, right? And so this now gene has been suppressed, and that it affects the entire system, which creates a dependency on, and here's where my speculation is, glucose. What does glucose trigger? Insulin. What does insulin trigger? Growth. Why do we have bigger brains? Oh, because we're so smart. If we're so smart, why have we allowed something like that to happen?
Right.
So I get the empathy thing, and I'm into it, right? And I think better health, meditation, breath work, all that leads back. And I'm way more empathetic than I am. And all of that. But the genes that I want to pass on, I'm not going to pass on any genes most likely in this lifetime, but I will pass on. You got two ways of doing it. You can pass on genes, or you can pass on information. So I'm going to pass on as much information as I possibly can. And in that process, it's what sort of things are we stressing? Because it's really about stress. That's all it is.
For sure.
Stress is going nowhere. If we don't start to romanticize stress, if we continue to demonize stress, we will remain a suffer culture. We will bow down. We will bow down to the almighty dollar versus what everybody's learning right now, family and friends. My sister just wrote me and she's like, oh my God, she at home schools her kids, right? But she's like, oh, not a lot's changed other than the fact every night I don't have to be somewhere. And I get to just be calm and chill out with my family. I'm like, back to living.
Back to living. Well, that's a great breakdown. Genes and information. If there's a great book, Jaws, I just read that book a few months back. That's a phenomenal book for whoever. Yeah, Deandra. So for that question, read the book Jaws if you want a full breakdown of what Brian just said too. That's a great place to start, and that'll open up your eyes to a lot of tremendous things as well. So, hey man, I'll shoot you a message a little later on as well. But dude, it was great seeing you. That was a blast. Dynamite dropping at the end there on everything, and you're the guy who brought me into this field. I'll always be indebted to what you showed me and brought me into performance. And it was a blast to put this together. I'm excited for people to see this. But it's great seeing you first and foremost, Brian. And then what you're doing it's amazing stuff, brother. So let's keep pushing the pendulum and keep sharing the great information.
Harvey, I greatly appreciate all of that. I got nothing but love for you, but you are the one who brought yourself into this industry.
I appreciate that, man. Well, you helped. So I'm just somebody I'm just a guide in a sense to a large degree. Hey, here's some information, play around with this, see where it takes you. Hey, as I always say, we're just a man on a walk, we're just walking.
Exactly. That's it. I'm just a man on a walk, bro. That's it.
All right, brother. Well, hey, I'll give you a shout here later. This was great stuff. I'll let you know when we showcase it.
All right, man.
All right, man. I'll see you.
Right on, brother.